I've been getting a little bit too into my head. Let me try to do this as candidly as possible. I think accountability is good. I think it's important. Please clap. I think that something that fundamentally changed how I live my life happened 2 years ago. I started realizing that you can't really undo damage, right? You can't really go back in time to stop yourself from making that mistake that you did. And it's made me not necessarily more cautious or careful, but it's helped me understand the gravity of all of my actions, right? I think this is why Life is Strange, when I first played it and I first watched it, was such a power fantasy to me, such a evocative and enthralling experience, because it plays into the fantasy of, what if I could do that again? What could I change? I think all time travel goes into this, where we look at ourselves and we look at where we err, and often these errors come from when we don't fully think through the situation, and passion is a thing. But even during passion, you're accountable for what you do, right? I had a video about being drunk and being inebriated, and how that can be a liberating experience for many of us who overthink what we do, who are much too careful and much too precious about our perception and who we are. But on the flip side to that, if I may speak to that, any mistake you do while you're drunk, you can cite a reason as to why that mistake was easier for you to make, but you still made it. Same for if I make a mistake under duress or my mental hygiene being so poor, right? I'm still responsible for the harm that I produce through that headspace. I was having a conversation with a chatter recently about the Maximus video, about whether or not Maximus, the character in Fallout, doing good, the action itself, would be tarnished if his intention was not to do good. And I came upon, or I landed upon, this idea of consequentialism, where, in my opinion, the end result often is the most important thing, not necessarily the intent. Because if you hurt someone, even if you didn't end up wanting to or imagining that you could, you still hurt someone, right? Which is why Life is Strange is so evocative, because the first 2 or 3 episodes are you playing around with this space wherein everything you do is consequence-free. There is no accountability for you, and you can go back and forth however much you'd like. But there's a turn. There's a volta halfway through the series where there's a person you have to talk down, that you cannot use your powers in order to help. Suddenly, accountability is back on you, like a dog at your heels. And you can't escape it. You must recall all that you've experienced during your playtime in order to realize, how can I best help this person here? And the consequences for just playing, are real. This is cribbed from, I believe it's Innuendo Studios' video on superposition. It's a really good video. I'll put it in the end card. It's fantastic. Life is Strange goes from being a power fantasy of being able to do whatever you want and trying things over and over again, and becomes a game chastising you. Why would you have ever thought that it was okay? Why would have you ever thought that it was somehow appropriate for you to dodge the consequences of your actions? And it's really, really interesting in that way, because both endings, while one is more developed, I think the one wherein the damage is already done is, for me, the real ending, aside of the, shipping. It's the real ending because you have to live with yourself after it. I had a really, really fun time on Monday. I celebrated my 800 followers and 2 years, and I got super drunk. I remember it in pieces. I remember maybe a quarter of it, and watching the VOD is going to kill me on the inside. But whatever I did there, whatever I said, ultimately I'm still responsible. Before watching the VOD, thinking back to it, I can't say I necessarily regret anything. Maybe how cringe I was, but not anything I said. I like to think I was honest there. No, whatever you do, you've done it, and there's no going back. There's no undoing that damage. If I knock over a vase, I can repair it as best as I could, but you'll still see the cracks. And I didn't realize how important that was. The fact that you can't just retcon a moment or turn it back. until maybe 2 years ago. I had this very unhealthy practice with a previous group that I was with that we would just all agree, hey, why don't we compartmentalize the worst things we've done to each other? We just completely existed in a space free of accountability, free of harm that we did to each other, and we just coped. And for a while that worked, but then I met somebody very close to me that I really care about having in my life. And when we are pushed to our very limits as human beings, we often perform things that don't reflect who we are as a character, as a person, or who we are most of the time. But I think it's also fair to say that that's not us. It's just us at our extremes. And we're not a monster for our brief moments of weakness. Even still, the morning after, I had a conversation with this person, and I said, hey, remembering the community I was in the past, and I go, hey, can we just forget that last night happened? And they said, no. And that really shook me to my core. They said no, that their perception of me could never be divorced of how I was that night, which absolutely fair, right? They experienced it. They saw me at a weak state, and how do you really compartmentalize it? How do you put that away? But it's given me a greater appreciation for that person. They and I still talk to this day. They and we are some of the closest friends to each other that we are, and I think about it a lot. Realizing I have the capacity to scare someone like that has made me more mindful about the things that come out of my mouth. And I don't think I'm a poorer person for curating myself and trying to deliver the me that I know I am versus the me at my worst or at my weakest. And I just want to say I appreciate all of you for bearing with me incredibly drunkenly. Ding, 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 10 minutes. I don't think I got to this in the original 10 minutes, but it's something that is so core to the reason why I wanted to talk about it in the first place that I'm going to amend it if it doesn't come out in the content. The reason that I wanted to talk on that is because, more importantly, you can't unsay things. Once you've said it, there is no responsibility of the person opposite you to forgive it or to contextualize it or understand it. There's nothing more you can do. And it's made me a lot more careful about how I present myself, because you should try your best at any given point to say only things that you mean sincerely. Because if you try to hurt someone and go to a place where your character doesn't occupy, you've still said it. You still said it. And there's no total forgiveness.